What do you think of when you hear the word eugenics? Maybe it's Nazi death camps or mad doctors in asylums long ago, and you'd be right, of course. But it's also country fairs, respected scientific societies, and yes, church leaders. First, some background. Eugenics was coined by Francis Galton from the Latin for good birth in 1877. Galton was inspired by his cousin Charles Darwin and his evolutionary theory, as well as the survival of the fittest notion of the secular sociologist Herbert Spencer. But eugenics didn't stay in the academy. Starting in Indiana in 1907, over half of the states in the nation would eventually pass some kind of involuntary sterilization law for prisoners and the insane. Fitter family competitions would take place in agricultural fairs across the nation, with a medal quoting Psalm 16, "Yea, I have a goodly heritage," given to the winners. Yes, the Bible was co-opted into this tragic enterprise. The American Eugenics Society recruited prominent modernist theologians like Anglican Bishop William Lawrence and the popular minister Harry Emerson Fosdick into their advisory committees, and then published a eugenics catechism to sell their message to churchgoers. But even beyond the efforts of the scientists to recruit the clergy, the church itself pushed many of the motions of heredity and eugenics. The Reverend Oscar McCullough produced a family study on the Ishmaelites that blamed crime and social problems on heredity, and urged reforms as the president of the National Conference of Charities and Correction in the 1890s. Driven out of a concern for improving the condition of the poor, other social gospel reformers were at the forefront of promoting scientific efforts for racial uplift that would ultimately become the eugenics movement. And yet, not everyone in the church was convinced. In vetoing Nebraska's proposed sterilization law in 1913, John Moorhead, the governor, explained that he thought the bill was keeping more with the pagan age than the teachings of Christianity. Man is not an animal. So, which church leaders had the moral foresight to recognize the evils of eugenics? Well, for one, the Catholic Church showed an early opposition to methods used in the eugenics movement. As early as 1910, the American Ecclesiastical Review was debating eugenics, noting some of the values in improving families, but expressing deep concerns over the methods of sterilization. And by 1930, the papal encyclical Casti Concubi firmly established that the Church was opposed to abortion, to birth control, and to sterilization. G.K. Chesterton, a British Catholic writer, but whose works were read in America, published Eugenics and Other Evils against the entire philosophy behind eugenics. And while there were a few friars who were sympathetic to the goals of the movement, Catholic commitment to life as part of natural law is well established in history. Fundamentalists were more quiet about the moral hazards of eugenics, but as part of their general opposition to the teaching of evolution, they were a contrarian voice in the time. Billy Sunday dismissed eugenics among a host of other modern ideas as being unable to solve the pressing problems of the day, and William Jennings Bryan expressed deep concern over how social Darwinism and the scientific breeding of eugenics would lead to effects on the care of the poor. But it was not until the 1930s that conservative Protestant Walter Maier, in his radio program The Lutheran Hour, would attack eugenics head-on, noting the impossibility of solving problems in biology without considering the underlying condition of sin. So, what do we make of the Church's role in the evils of eugenics? Some in the Church promoted it, others opposed it. Does that come down to no guidance? Well, as historian Christine Rosen notes in her monograph Preaching Eugenics, it was those who embraced modern ideas first and adjusted their theologies later who were most likely to adopt eugenics. And yet, without ever embracing the idea, fundamentalists were slow to recognize the unique evils of sterilization in the same way that the Catholics were, and, historically speaking, were too quiet on the issue. The horrors of eugenics were not exposed until Nazi death camps in World War II. Hopefully, we can learn from their mistake and quickly and effectively warn of the ethical ramifications of doctrinal compromises.